So I should say that you and I did a recording of this interview several months ago, and then by a number of different twists of fate and misfortune, that recording was lost. But the good side of that was that now we're doing the interview again, and I myself have done a healing breathwork retreat with you in Brazil. So maybe we should talk about that a bit.
There needs to be more dialogue between the sort of mad pride survivors movement and this world of transpersonal psychology, because they sort of operate in different silos. And I really saw Will as representing that mad pride movement, and I was sort of on the transpersonal side. So I wanted to get this together, and learn from each other.
There is a tendency of overlap. There are people who are making that dialogue, especially in the context of the Lang Symposium at Esalen. So for the past 5 years, I've been assisting in the facilitation of breathwork at Esalen. And Esalen, of course, has a long history with breathwork and psychedelics. And initially, they were hesitant about bringing breathwork back, and they were also very hesitant about having a psychiatric survivor oriented event happen there every year, but it's gone really well and they've become a lot more open to us. And we've made a point in the breath work that we've done to invite everyone. So even people who have a history of psychosis or a history of hospitalization or diagnosis would be welcome to come. Now, everybody who's invited, we get to know them and we talk with them. And sometimes maybe it's not the right time for you to do it. There were times when I was there where it wasn't the right time for me to do it. So it's an individual question of inclusion and a good fit, but it's not based on this assumption that just because you have a label, you wouldn't be invited. And our experience has been really, really positive. People have very strong emotional experiences. There's lots of tears, there's lots of anger that comes out, there's lots of memories. And then the gathering at the end where we share what we've been through and we make drawings, these mandala drawings of what we've been through, is extremely moving for people, and they come through it just feeling so grateful and so thankful for it. And of course, not everybody. Some people don't necessarily have a powerful experience, or it wasn't for them, or they think about it and they change their mind later. But I've been very impressed by the depth and the power of these breathwork sessions, and that's one of the things that opened me and got me interested in doing this work with you, Sean.
So, Will, you came down. I wasn't even sure 24 hours before you came. If I wasn't even sure if you were coming because your schedule was changing so much. But you arrived, and then we were just, we were just talking, and I wasn't even sure if we were going to start. I wasn't sure if we were going to do breath work at all when you arrived.
I wasn't sure either. And I have learned in my own life that decisions like this aren't really just my decision. I mean, they're a decision that needs to be made by the inner healer, by my ancestors, and by the universe. And so I was at the last minute, I was like, well, maybe I'll do a breath work, or maybe I'll just assist and witness you doing a breath work, or I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then that night, I think it was the first night I was there, I had a really powerful dream. And the dream was I was walking through a courtyard and there was a young man, a young indigenous aboriginal there in front of me. And I was very sort of mistrustful, or who is this guy? But I had a very positive feeling towards him as he stood in front of me. And then I saw on his hand was a small insect. It was like a little beetle or like a little ladybug, but it was crystal or had glitter on it, or diamond or like jeweled bug that was on his hand. And then I looked at my left hand, and my left hand was covered with these bugs. So I woke up with a very positive feeling about the breathwork opportunity. I felt like my association with this character that I encountered in the dream was that this was some kind of healer, this was some kind of shaman, or some kind of sadhu or medicine person, and that there was something that was a little bit scary and a little bit off-putting that maybe I don't trust, but that actually could be very valuable, could be a real gift of some kind. And so then when I told this dream to our hosts at the hotel, there was sort of this reaction, because actually there is a spirit relationship with a kind of insect, a kind of bug that's a big part of the totem or the protector spirit for this hotel, for this land where these breathwork retreats happen. So there was this strong, strong synchronicity where I was actually communicated with by one of the protector spirits on that land, this little bug, this little insect. One of the hosts has this long relationship with the spirit. So it very much all was coming together. And that was a central part of my decision. It wasn't just an intellectual, rational decision. It was intellectual, it was rational. I did bring in that piece of it. But without that sense of a deeper invitation and a deeper message, I probably wouldn't have done it. So when the dream happened, I woke up the next morning, I told everybody, okay, let's do it. And the first thing that we did was you did your session, Sean.
Yeah, well, this adds a bit of an added level of complexity. But one of the things I'd learned on my retreats was that on the retreats, I was absorbing clients' subconscious energies so that while they were working on their stuff independently, there would be a chunk of their material that would be coming through me. And our conversation with Will the night before was very intense. We were just talking nonstop for like 3 hours, I think. And then when I went to bed, I was having funny feelings, strange dreams. I can't remember the dreams. And when I woke up, I was like, how would you guys feel like if I breathed first? Because I think I was picking up Will in our conversation yesterday. And so I did, in the very beginning, we agreed Will would sit on the side, and I did what I called a surrogate breathwork session, where I'm actually breathing on someone else's behalf, usually on my client's behalf. And that's where we started. Yeah, and actually, it's a radical departure from Groff's work because he's very insistent about this inner healer and people going through their own work. And he's very cautious about people taking on the role of being like a guru. So, telling even the Groff people that I was taking in this energies and working through it in breath work has been very controversial and a little bit difficult for me to sort of open up about. But it's been happening nonstop for 5 years. And so very quickly, my session with Will was on the side, and my facilitators, Antonio, Pedro, and Karen were supporting me. And once I got into the experience, Will, you kind of come across as quite methodical and measured and very sensitive to what's going on around you. But you had mentioned that sometimes your personal life has some really big ups and downs.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. And so I get into this experience and I feel like I'm on a roller coaster. And I'm just like going, whoa, whoa. And my arms are flailing and it's really kind of silly. Then another part of the experience, I was dancing and I went into a period of like ecstasy and just fell over crying in beauty. And then in another part of the experience, I had a pain on my right rib cage, at the lower part of my right rib cage. I was thinking that Will's life is like a roller coaster because he enjoys it. And what I said to Will was, I said, Will, and I was nervous to say this to you. I said, it's almost like you enjoy the chaos in your life. Like if you had been arrested by the police, there would be something about that you would find fun.
I'm not sure I would describe it as fun, but I would definitely describe it as something that I have agreed to welcome into my life because it seems to be part of who I am and the deeper calling. And before I went into the psychiatric system, I was very actively involved in political movements and social activism, and including lots of demonstrations and being arrested 8 times. And so the point is not that you used or didn't use the word I would use. The point is that you were on the bullseye of something really big for me. And you were definitely synced up because we know each other, but we don't know each other, that well. And you were synced up. And then you said, well, I had this pain and I don't think this has anything to do with you. And it just was this pain in my side. And you pointed to your on the right side underneath your rib cage, where you don't know this, but I have a 6-inch scar because I had a near death experience because I was rushed into surgery just hours before I might have died. So when you pointed to that part of your body and said, well, I don't know if this is relevant or all, you were again right on the bullseye with something very, very deep with me. So this was really powerful and really uncanny. And this was even before I had myself done the breath work for that day because Sean was going first, I was going second.
Before you start a breathwork process, any breathwork process, but particularly with holotropic breathwork and with my retreats, We have a contract that we ask people to abide by. And because we were so friendly with each other and because you had had your breathwork experience already, we weren't particularly buttoned down about that.
Exactly. It was a big oversight. There was a way in which the container wasn't set up. We talk about set and setting in this work and also the psychedelics world. It's a very strong concern that you want to have a very clear, very buttoned down, very airtight set and setting, including what the expectations are, including the ground rules in the larger picture. And this is where the work gets uncanny because you start to feel like you're having dreams, you're having synchronicities, there's psychic phenomenon. And this is not just something that happens in shamanic and in breath work and in psychedelic and in transpersonal worlds. The reality is that if you talk to people who are therapists, who are psychiatrists even, and they're honest, and they talk to you about working with people on a deep level, yeah, there's psychic stuff that happens. There's paranormal things that happen. There are premonitions. There are dreams that are precognitive. There are synchronicities. There's telepathic kinds of things.
And I would say that it's anticipated that this will happen. It's not like a rare thing. It happens every single session.
So we started out with this oversight. It was a mutual oversight, but it was basically your guys' responsibility as the facilitators. But the main thing was that there was an instruction that you and Antonio, Pedro, and Karen, who were our hosts and co-facilitators, this was the rules that they were all playing by. But they forgot to tell me all the rules. And the one of the main rules was don't leave the mat. So it wasn't made clear in a formal way as a preparation for our setting that don't go off the mat. And if you do try and go off the mat, we're going to grab you and put you back on the mat. And so this created a problem down the road. So what happened in the breath work was the music starts to play. I'm wearing my mask, I'm blindfold, and I am, I'm just sort of lying there and I'm very open to, well, nothing's going to happen. Well, maybe a lot is going to happen. I'm feeling relatively comfortable with Sean and Antonio, Pedro and Karen, but I've also just met them and I don't really know Sean that well. I know Sean a bit. So I didn't really know how deep I was going to go. And the music is playing. And I remember thinking, well, nothing really is happening. I kind of need to go and meet it. You sort of swim out to it as well as it coming to you. But it's okay if nothing really happens and nothing really seems to be happening. And I was kind of rocking my body back and forth a little bit and I was rocking my legs back and forth. And so I thought, oh, I'll just start to rock my shoulders back and forth. So I started to rock my shoulders back and forth. And then wham, it was like someone struck a match on the floor of gasoline and I just completely ignited. I went into a very strong altered state. It's a state that I'm somewhat familiar with. I've been in this state before because it's related to past traumatic experiences, past violence experiences, including experiences in the psychiatric hospital where I'm surrounded by danger and dangerous people. And I got to get in touch with my rage to be able to defend myself because that's what I often haven't been able to do. So it's a very intense memory for me. And in the breath work, I started to go into that rage state and I was feeling a lot of strength in my body. I was feeling very animalistic. I was feeling very primal. I was kind of crawling around and climbing around and just very in kind of martial arts stances. And it started to be vocalizing and yelling. And I started to crawl around in the space.
Will starts crawling around. Then we've got these very large orange pillows, and we just kept feeding him these pillows, and he was just like this pillow throwing machine for about 20 minutes. And I think the more of those pillows we sent to you, you were just working yourself into a lather. You're just get hot and sweaty, and you're breathing heavy, and you're throwing pillows all over the place. And for me, it starts to get fun, because it's kind of, I don't know. I just get into the flow of things and it's like, wow, you're really getting in there. And
What I'm doing in that moment, I think, is awakening to a certain kind of aliveness, like a radical, engaged, embodied aliveness, which is thrilling, but it was also scary because I was fighting back. My experience in the state that I was in was that I was throwing these pillows to get rid of them. And it was very aggressive and very angry and very intense.
maybe it's important to point out too that at that moment you're trying to get rid of these pillows. I don't know what's going on in your psyche, and none of us really do. We just see that you're getting more aggressive, and so we're there to support it. That's
Exactly,
it.
because that's part of the frame and part of the setting is that the facilitators really are trusting the inner process of the person who's breathing. There's not like a strong, okay, now we're going to do therapy with you. We're going to engage with you. We're going to give you interventions and do techniques. And it's actually much more of like, we're just here to witness and make safe and give you the space to go through what you need to go through. So you guys you didn't know what was going on. I'm having this, my eyes are closed. I'm in this dream world. Really, it's like entering into a world. I'm in this dream world. I'm interacting with these inner figures of threat and fighting back and danger and memories and psychiatric system. And but you guys, all you know is I'm just picking up pillows and throwing them and being loud.
We're not there to guide the process. We're just facilitating wherever you're at. We're supportive of it.
So you're holding an expectation container as well. You're like, hey, he's going into something deep, it's intense, that's what this is about. Ultimately it's positive. So then the next thing that happened, and this is where it got different, was I started crawling around more, and I got right to the edge of the mat, and then I broke the rules and I crossed off the edge of the mat onto the floor. Now the floor is concrete and there are walls, and there's lots and lots of reasons why there is this rule: stay on the mat. It's for my safety. But we hadn't discussed it and clarified it. We discussed a little bit, but there hadn't been that formal piece of, okay, here is the container. There had been this oversight. We overlooked that. And what we hadn't discussed either was what happens if Will goes off the mat, is that one of the other facilitators is going to put their hands on Will and then physically move him back on the mat. Now, talk about taking a giant bucket of gasoline and throwing it onto this fire. Because here I am, I'm in this inner dream world where I'm fighting back against the psychiatric system. I'm fighting back against the bullies in my life. I'm fighting back against my father. I was also having very strong images of people that I work with who've been raped. And I was having very strong images of fighting back against them on their behalf, or united with them, or connected with them. So I'm in a life or death struggle with throwing the pillows and contacting all this power. And as soon as Antonio Pedro put his hand on me, I just fought it off. And then, of course, he grabbed me more. And then I fought him off more. And then pretty soon, he's trying to restrain me. And of course, that fit, I drew him into my drama in a sense. He was playing the perfect actor in my drama. And I screamed and screamed and screamed, F you, F you. And I screamed and I was just fighting him off. And finally, I did fight him off. And that was a really important piece of this for me, that I wasn't
And you
subdued.
thought you were fighting me, right?
I
Because you're
I
blindfolded.
thought I didn't know who I
Thought it
was
was me.
fighting. I thought I was fighting
Okay.
Sean. I thought I was fighting all three of you. And I was
Okay.
able to both get you away from me and scream, "Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't effing touch me," which is an incredibly empowering moment, because that's so much of us need that. If you've been violated, as I have been, being able to say, "No, don't effing touch me," and scream at the top of your lungs can be a very powerful corrective experience. And I remember screaming because you have to remember that I was in this altered state, but it's also like I have a periscope up. They didn't know it, but
Right.
if they had just said to me, "Hey, Will, time out, take the blindfold off. We're going to turn the music off because we need to contact you and get you out of the state for a moment so we can do some safety checks," I would have been able to come out. Because you have to understand, I'm not on psychedelic drugs. I haven't done ayahuasca. I'm not in some kind of like out of control chemical intoxication state. I've just been breathing and I've just entered into this altered state. So I was very available to connect
Right. But
and
we didn't
communicate.
want you to come
But they
out.
didn't want me to come out. They didn't
No.
no at all. That wasn't part of the whole thing. It was just trusting and going in. And so, but there was some confusion about the rules at this point. So I remember screaming, "Okay, I won't go off the edge of the mat, but can I scream?" And they said, "Yes, you can scream." And I said, "Can I scream at you?" And then they
Yeah.
said, "Yes, you can scream enough." And I said, "Can I scream obscenities at you?" And then they said, "Yes." And then I just said, "F you." I just started screaming at them. "Don't you effing touch me." Don't. Just for like, I mean, how long did it go on for, Sean? I was in this really extreme. I'm sweating. I'm like stomping around. I'm thrashing my fists around.
Yeah. It was Al Pacino. That's all I can say. It was Al Pacino, man. You just went off the rails. It was just
I
wild.
was
Yeah.
very wild, and
Yeah.
it was
And
extreme.
mean.
Oh
You
yeah,
were mean angry. You
oh
weren't
yeah.
like being, can I yell at you guys? It says, can I yell at you
I was like,
guys? Like,
"F you! You guys are
bruh.
so stupid. You better effing
Yeah.
let me yell at you. God damn it!" I was very strong, and then at some point, I decided to fall forward onto the mat, and that was very scary. But I was in complete control. But this was really scary, and so Karen put her hands on me, and I said, "Don't touch me! Don't touch me!" I was screaming at her, and of course, one of the most basic forms of consent is to get consent around touch. And I was not giving my consent. And here they were touching me without my consent. So for me to push back and to scream and to yell was very strong self protective and very strong defensive and very strong assertive of my life force and my vitality and my self care. It was really meaningful for me. So at this point, I shifted. And what happened was, well, what did you see me do?
I had never seen this before, but you had managed to collect different mattresses while you were blindfolded. You grabbed various mattresses and sort of doubled them up. So you created your own little mountain. And then you sort of perched yourself like a gargoyle on top of this pile of yoga mats.
Yeah, and my inner experience was that I was not meditating in the kind of peaceful, relaxed state, but that I was a predator animal. I was like a gargoyle, or I was like Batman, or I was like a ninja, just in this poised, coiled, ready to strike, super alert, extremely powerful, but at the same time, stillness, space. And I remember it was
Okay.
extremely important for me to be completely still, like I was watching something from very far away, like a hunter, like a predator. And that if I
Right.
moved even slightly, I would be revealing myself, or I would be vulnerable. And I was really there for, I was like there for a half an hour or 20 minutes or something.
No, no, it was, and this is where I can show, um, you didn't move a muscle, you didn't move a finger for over an hour. And I'd never seen that before. So I was like, okay, either he's in a deeply healing space or he's disassociating or catatonic and we're in trouble. And so I start to think about how many days I could stay with Will before his flight leaves, how much underwear I have. My mind is going in a wide variety of ways from, wow, this is an amazing healing to, oh my God, what's going to happen to this guy?
Because my sense of time, like I didn't even remember there was an hour. I don't even
Oh,
remember.
yeah,
My
easy an
sense of
hour.
time was completely gone because you're in another realm. And of course, if this sounds psychotic, it's because in a sense, it was psychotic. I was accessing the same kinds of primal unconscious material that you're inside of when you're in psychosis, but we often don't see it in its most extreme expression because there's not a safe space for it. It's so quickly meditated, and you're surrounded by people who are not giving you the space and opportunity and safety to do it, but who are trying to control the process from the outside. So, in a sense, it's like Will had a controlled, intentional psychosis with healing purpose, with a healing motivation. That's what we were doing. And so I was there for a long time. And I remember I was so much in a us them power thing with you guys. I remember realizing that they're waiting for me to say, okay, I'm going to come out of it because the music is now quiet. It's all come down and it's time to end the session. And I remember thinking, they're waiting for me to end this. And there's no effing way that I'm going to end this before they end it. I was in this tug of war psychically in my mind that I was going to let them be the ones who ended this because I was ready to be there for another hour or 2 hours or 3 hours as a protect. I was in such a strong protection threat state.
Yeah, to give people an idea, the set went 2 hours, and then I added an extra half hour of relaxing music, and Will didn't come back. And so I turned the music off entirely, and you didn't come back for another half an hour. You just sat there in silence for another 30 minutes. So it was like an extra hour of time.
And then just suddenly I stood up and said, "Oh, I have to go pee." And I walked out, I went to the bathroom and came back. And I wouldn't say I was 100% out of the altered state when I took the blindfold off and we started to talk about what happened. And my memory was that in the conversation, I was again surrounded by therapists in a psychiatric setting, because what happened was that my facilitators, who I care about and I respect and I'm very appreciative of, my experience was that you were still stuck in this sort of psychiatric role because you kept talking about how I was unsafe and I was this, and you were not
Mm.
really focusing as much on your own reactions or your own fear response or your own difficulty communicating with me, or you weren't kind of focusing on the fact that you were tense and a little overwhelmed and kind of tight and defensive coming out of it. And so we went back and forth. We sort of went around in circles where we weren't connecting at all. But then slowly, I think like the ice started to melt. And then you guys started to say, yeah, we are a little bit defensive. And then I got a little bit softened because it was nice to hear you focus on yourselves and your own defensiveness. And then slowly, 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 everything kind of came back to our ordinary reality, that we all kind of came out of this intense experience.
2 hours later.
And that was important for me when you recognize that, hey, yeah, we went into a mild altered state too, because we got protective and defensive, and it was all in the name of safety and caring for you. But at the same time, you were a bit defensive and a little concerned and worried and in this kind of control stance. And that was very reparative for me. That was very healing for me, because to be able to sit with people who are kind of in the therapist role, you were kind of in the therapist role, and to have this dramatic experience where I felt you invading me and touching me without permission and controlling me, and then I was in this big conflict with you, and then to come out of it and you're still kind of defensive, but then we talked about it enough that you softened and got self-reflective and like, hey, we can talk about ourselves, not just talk about Will's process. That was incredibly healing. That was probably the high point of the whole thing, because when I came out of it, I could have I could have just kept that lingering mistrust of all three of you, like they don't get it, and I'm just going to play nice, and I'm just going to kind of, like, oh yeah, I feel better now. But no, we spent a lot of time talking about that. We still feel mistrustful. What's going on? I said you should have done this, and you guys said no, no, you should have done this, and we were a little bit, and then slowly that changed, and we reconnected, and that was a really beautiful aspect of the whole experience for me.
I was like, there's some tension here. I'm feeling some tension that
Yeah.
we got to clean. And I was like, we got to clean this up. Like for me, it was like, we can't leave the room until we clean up this tension between us.
Yeah, and I was like, "Yeah, no kidding. There's a lot, there's a lot."
Yeah.
And that, I think, that speaks to your sensitivity and your transparency and your honesty as a facilitator. We all kind of got really challenged, and I think we all met the challenge, which was really beautiful. And that's a way in which the whole scene kind of organized itself. I mean, it's something very uncanny, but even with the omission of the ground rules at the beginning, and then the things that happen with people getting touched and me going over the line of the cushions and everything, all that sort of played an important role in what was a positive experience. And so that was a important part of this, was revisiting that part of myself and kind of looking at how deeply my own fear operates in the background and kind of runs my life, and getting in touch with it and being able to be witnessed. And another piece of it too, Sean, was that this rage, I felt very strongly like it was my rage, but it wasn't just my rage. It's more like, instead of me being a car that has a trunk full of rage, it's more like there's rage in the ocean. And if you go deep down enough, you just are connecting with the whole ocean. And Sean, before our interview today, you had asked me, well, how has it been for you? How has it been since the breath work that we did? Have you noticed some changes in your life? And I started to think about that. And the biggest change, and this is a pretty significant piece for me, and I wouldn't say the breath work caused it. It could be that the fruit on the tree was already ripe, and the breath work was kind of the wind that came that shook and the fruit dropped. Maybe that's something like that, the timing of it. But it definitely, I think, played an important role, is that I've been really more in touch with my risk taking around my political activism. That people who know me know that I'm much more involved with the climate emergency and have been much more engaged and much more active in studying it, in political activism, and being involved with the huge climate strike that just happened, in doing local organizing. And people don't know my history, but before I was in the psychiatric system, I was very strongly involved with nonviolence and revolutionary politics and left politics. I was working for a journal, Capitalism, Nature, Socialism. Part of my first hospitalization, I was working on a academic essay about the greenhouse effect and about the future of environmentalism, and very strongly facing this question of extermination and our civilization as a death drive to destroy itself. I was very strongly confronting that before I went into psychiatry. The stress of it, the overwhelm of it, was one piece that landed me in the psychiatric hospital. And then from that point of being in psychiatry, it stops. Like, it was like I was shut down. Like, my engagement with that question was just buried. And, I've been involved with the Icarus Project. I've been involved with Valley Free Radio. I was protesting the Iraq War before it started. I've been involved with activism, but directly confronting and facing this question of the extermination of life on the planet. And that has only been slowly coming back in because I've been too afraid. And so, with my work with the Lang Symposium at Esalen, of course, people who know R.D. Laing's work, I mean, he was very strongly engaged with the question of the extermination of humanity and the death drive of our civilization, specifically around nuclear war, which was really up in his era. But the environmental crisis is also a big part of what he was engaging with. And so I've been starting to work with it in a more direct way and a more courageous way, in the sense of facing my own fears and acknowledging that I'm overwhelmed, I'm lost, I don't know what to do, I feel helpless, I feel out of control, I feel confused, and I feel deeply, deeply afraid even to open the door and look at this. And so, since doing the breath work with you and dramatizing so cathartically this threat, attack, defense, fighting back, dealing with my terror, dealing with the enemy, all this kind of emotional material that was up in the breathwork session, I think it's really helped me to be more courageous and be more and to be more engaged and to take more risks about the climate emergency. I mean, we were talking about it before the interview, and I was trying to kind of give you a sense of what I've learned about the climate emergency. And I'm afraid, like, I don't know enough. I'm not a scientist. I haven't got all the facts at my, and I'm just like, no, I know enough. It's clear enough. This is my fear that's holding me back, and starting to bring that in more. And so for that, I'm grateful for the work that we did. And I think it's an interesting sort of result. It's like a concrete outcome, not just because we have one more person who's an activist around the climate emergency, which is important, but because I'm getting more in touch with a part of myself that I left behind.
For you to work through your holotropic myth, Antonio, Pedro, Karen, and I, even though we're trained to be supportive, we're on your side and all this, for your myth to work, we needed to be the enemy. You
Right,
needed to turn us into the enemy.
right, right.
And you were fighting against us because we represented the system. No matter how hard we tried to say we're on your side, we're not. No, we were the system. You're fighting against us. And then the next day you said, you fought the system and that you won.
Yes. Yeah.
That there was a sense of victory that you carried. And this ties back into what I believe, and this is my conjecture, it might not be 100% accurate, but in the Groff theory, there's this in birth trauma, you have this fight out the birth canal, and then there's the birth itself, which brings this sense of victory. And Antonio Pedro was the first one to bring it up. He was like, Will's doing a lot of fighting here. I think this is like third perinatal matrix where you have the fight out the birth canal. And then the next day when you said, I won, that's fourth perinatal matrix. That's the sense of victory when you're born. So that indicates to us that, you were working with, and you also mentioned that you were fighting with many people at many levels, things happening in your world today, going back to your father. So it does look like a condensed experience, a coex going back into your own birth process. So this is deeply healing.
And the holotropic breathwork folks, the transpersonal psychology folks, have been studying all this and seeing the patterns. And I see validity. I'm always hesitant to fit into a system or to fit into some kind of, evaluative framework of putting you on a map, because I think that those have limitations. But what you're saying resonates for me. I mean, for me, there's a certain kind of narrative almost of soul retrieval, that something, a piece of me has been left behind with my encounter with psychiatry. It was the fighter in me. It was the one that was courageous enough to be a political activist for calling for a nonviolent revolution against global capitalism and against the systems of authoritarianism that we see in, the Soviet Union or other so-called socialist states, and really seeing the possibility of human liberation. I had dampened that part of myself.
Just to reiterate that while Will was going through all of this, for the most part, we were just like, everything's fine as long as he stays on the mat,
Right.
for the most part,
Yeah.
right? As crazy as it went, it was like we would actually look at each other and feel quite enthused about where you were going with this work, even though sometimes it meant at our detriment, yelling and screaming at us and stuff like that. It was like, okay, he's being really tough on us, but that's part of the work.
Well,
So
that I think is one of the beautiful things about the paradigm that I really admire, is the sense that, look, there's a healing force that we all have within us, and if we give it the space and we give it the opportunity and we give it the safety and we encourage it and invite it, it'll take care of itself. It has a life of its own. And so our job is not to be the healers or be the experts or be the professionals with the interventions or the tools, but just to help encourage the space to happen and create the safety and be witnesses and be supporters, because people have their own process and it's their own inner wisdom really that needs to be in the driver's seat.
right, and that's why I'm doing the retreats privately, because the safer that setting is, the more powerful the experiences can be, right? We couldn't have done what we did with you in a group setting. It was too chaotic. You needed too much space. It was too much, and you needed three facilitators with you.
Well, I would have something different would have happened for me in a group setting, because when I've done the breath works at Esalen, I get pretty intense, but I keep it more contained. And I've done different pieces of the same experience. For example, the last breath work that I did at Esalen, I experienced my father being tortured. I experienced my body. It felt I had strong images, and it created so much empathy for my dad, so much seeing his vulnerability and seeing how wounded he was, because you can learn facts about someone that this happened to them, this is part of their story. They can even tell you the story, but until you really get it on a deeper emotional and even a body level, you may not have that kind of empathy. And so maybe a different set and setting with a group, for example, would have generated a different process for me that would have been, because I wouldn't want to go to a place that says, well, Will is someone who has an explosive process, and so he shouldn't be doing this work in groups, because maybe I would have a different experience
No,
in groups or
I
have a
don't
different.
want to say
Yeah,
that. I don't
yeah.
want to say that.
But
Yeah.
one might be left with that impression, and but it's not about there's something inside of you that needs to come out. It's more like there's lots of things that could come out, and there's a set and setting, and the ingredients of the whole picture are going to create and help generate and support maybe what needs to happen. That's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, I'd say the inner healer knew that we were ready for nuclear. We were ready for Will Hall nuclear, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and it didn't actually go so far that anything was broken or anything was overwhelmed. It actually came we all came back together in this really positive and warm, connected way at the end, which was also really, really healing and reparative, because here we can go from, okay, I'm experiencing you all as the enemy, to then we're back to being friends again. We can drop that role that we were playing in that drama.
It's interesting for me to be on both sides of the sort of Will Hall personality, because it's like when we're connected, you're just so stimulating and engaging, and it's like we can talk for hours. But then if that distrust thing comes in, it's just like, what's going on? Where are we going
Oh
here?
man,
So yeah.
you got my number, Sean. What's going on? But okay, but let me back up a minute, because to say
Yeah.
it's this distrust thing or this mistrust thing, as I know I've been saying it, I've been describing it that way, but it's more complicated than that. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's like, does the seed distrust the sunlight if it's not ready to come out of the soil yet? Is that distrust, or is that more timing? Is that more the relationship? Is there something in you? Is there something in the other? What I've noticed is that it's easy to get into a trauma narrative, and trauma narratives can be very pathologizing. They can locate the problem in the person. And so more recently, I've been thinking in terms of conflict, that I have just a different way of being, and it's difficult to fit in because of the cultural context that I'm in. That if you and I met and if our first encounter was in silence, and we were able to really feel and notice and connect with each other, what you're experiencing as my mistrust that's holding back my excitement and my aliveness might be a totally different thing because of the cultural context of meeting each other in silence rather than meeting each other in, you know, chatting.
I'm not 100% sure where you're going, but I do know that if you're going through something on your side, it will trigger my stuff, you know? And so like if you shut down on me, I'll probably shut down on you too. And I don't want to, but I can get timid too. I can get timid too. And that's why, for example, I put myself in my own retreat in February because I just had a lot of my own issues that were surfacing. And part of the reason they were surfacing was the intensity of the retreats was bringing up stuff on my side.